After a dramatic manhunt following bombings in Boston, one suspect is killed and the other, severely injured, is now in hospital. The latter has been charged with using a weapon of mass destruction. The Tsarnaev brothers are accused of committing violent acts of terrorism. Their parents say they've been framed by the FBI. Tamerlan and Johar have been receiving celebrity coverage by the media as the public struggles to find answers to a long list of questions. This is The Debate.
Days after a dramatic manhunt for the Tsarnaev brothers, the mystery still remains unresolved, with many questions unanswered. The surviving suspect, Johar, remains hospitalized under heavy police guard. He is said to be unable to speak due to a gunshot wound to his throat. A federal law enforcement official has been quoted as saying that the teenage boy is awake and responding to questions in writing. In a move criticized by rights activists, officials have said they intend to question Johar without reading him his Miranda rights. The standard statement informing suspects they have a right to a lawyer and to remain silent. He was detained on Friday but was badly wounded. Police say his older brother, Tamerlan, was killed in a shootout earlier in the day during a massive manhunt. The Tsarnaev brothers have been identified as ethnic Chechens who had been living in the U.S. for about a decade. The FBI had interviewed the older brother, Tamerlan, in 2011 after a request from Russia, but closed the case after finding no cause for concern. The boy's parents say the children could not have planned such an attack as they were regularly being monitored by the FBI. Their father accuses the FBI of orchestrating the attacks. Anzar Tsarnaev says the whole incident is a, quote, setup, a political order, a Hollywood show. The argument raises the question that how somebody so closely watched by the FBI could have plotted terrorist acts without setting off alarm bells. Some analysts argue that the Boston Marathon bombing suspects were framed by the U.S. Secret Service.
This is a classic false flag, a classic self-inflicted wound, staged event. And we know that there was a drill at the Boston Marathon and at the end of the Boston Marathon, and there were Defense Department personnel and contractors swarming around with black backpacks, so that in case the police basically saw something suspicious, the bomb wouldn't be stopped.
Boston's Monday marathon blasts left 3 people dead and over 150 others injured. Soon after the explosions, conflicting accounts were given by intelligence officials about the incident. They announced that the suspects planted pressure cooker explosives at the marathon finish line. Then it was announced that the bombs went off inside a nearby shop. The FBI then released surveillance camera images of 2 young men and accused the pair of carrying out the bombings without offering any clear evidence against them. With all the media coverage given to Boston's bomb blasts, there still remains plenty of dark sides and tons of questions about the facts behind the incident. Some analysts say the U.S. government uses such opportunities to create fear among its own people in order to prepare them to accept another war.
This is why they needed to create something to rile up white nationalism in the country, because you know they want to send 20,000 troops to Syria. So you've got to get people to hate Muslims, to hate the other, to hate blacks again. So as broke as this country is, at least the poor people, they'll accept another war.
You're watching The Debate. I'd like to introduce our guests. In Florida, Mr. Scott Rickett, he's a former American intelligence linguist, and in the UK, London, former US diplomat, Mr. George Lambrakis. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being on The Debate. My first question from Mr. Lambrakis in London. Now, there is, of course, a lot to be said on this case, Mr. Lambrakis. There are a lot of questions. One is why Tamerlan, according to the first suspect who was dead, of course, according to his mother, was under surveillance, for instance, for at least 3 years. And if we accept he was under surveillance, why couldn't authorities stop the bombings from happening?
Well, to begin with, I don't think we can take the mother's opinion better than that of the FBI. I would guess that the FBI would be happy to believe that they were actually following him. But from what we have learned from a variety of sources, the FBI interviewed him and decided that there wasn't enough to go on. The FBI can't follow every person, every human being in America all the time. If they decide that this is not something they need to worry about, they're not going to follow him around. Following people around is a major operation. Also, remember that in America, the belief has been for a long time that the Chechens are fighting for their own independence against Russia. They're not really fighting against the United States. So the fact that the Russian Secret Service passed on a warning to the Americans that this was a dangerous person caused them to go and interview, but I can believe that after they found no reason at all under American law to follow this up, the mother is trying to cover up. They're off in Dagestan, I believe, the mother and the father.
Right.
I heard that the father was saying other things, that this was all a setup and that their son was not even involved in it. All of that is trying to cover up for the family, which quite clearly has problems now because their son, both sons, did a terrible thing.
Let's bring in Mr. Scott Rickard on this as well. Mr. Rickard, we also have Tamerlan's father saying that his son told him after the bombing that he'd received a phone call saying he was a suspect. And again, the issue that I guess there in London was saying, the FBI having confirmed that its officers did interview Tamerlan in 2011 at the request of a foreign government, which now could be Russia. But does this show that the brothers could have been set up as their parents are suggesting?
Well, whether or not they were set up is in question. I mean, the fact is that unfortunately, Mr. Lambrakis is right. You cannot follow everyone that's suspected on a full-time basis. Now, there's also been conflicting reports that the Russians also warned in November as early as 2012. And at the same time, you have to look at the history of Chechnya and Dagestan. These areas have been in turmoil for centuries, and they've been extremely anti-Western because of a lot of the participation with the Americans and the Turks. They are not friendly with any of their neighbors. Most of their neighbors have just torn through that area for centuries. Yeah. And the fact is that the Russians, this is a very predominantly Islamic, mostly Sunni, Wahhabists, and Salafists. So the Russians have been extremely brutal to these people, and this family actually arrived after one of the latest major incursions by Russia in Chechnya in the 90s, towards the late 90s. And these children arrived at the ages of 10 and 15 years old. And you have to understand that they are from families that live in some of the poorest parts of former Russia. So by and far, they understand when they come to a country like this that the Americans are not innocent in these incredible wars that go around the world. Neither are the Russians. And so for them to be anti-American or anti-Russian based upon the history of what's happened in their country, I find that very believable. Now, the fact that the older brother was probably becoming a little more radical than the younger brother, but the younger brother idolized the older brother. And whether they're innocent or guilty or the FBI knew about them and they were dragged in, I'm saying that these guys were fighting against something that's been destroying their nation for hundreds of years.
Okay,
and so
let's just stop there for
I'm not sympathetic.
Yeah, I'm sorry for stopping you there. I'd just like to bring in a comment by one of our viewers on our Facebook page. They've been making these comments throughout the day today on this specific case. We'll take a look at that comment and we'll be back with the next question.
One dead, one cannot speak. Who is behind the bombings? Neocons, Apex? Very convenient. Don't believe what the police and the media are saying.
Okay, we've got comments like this a lot on our Facebook page. Those who say that they cannot believe that the authorities didn't know about this, or they cannot believe the authorities couldn't stop it. And a lot of questions about how these people were basically chased after and how they were caught and why it took so long, etc. Now, Mr. Lambrakis, the government said that there were no terror drills on that fateful day, but we have eyewitness reports, according to some and according to others, the Boston Globe, to Twitter feed saying that police exploded a bomb actually at a library. Why would terror drills coincide with the actual bombing? Do you think that is suspicious in itself? We're hearing of the paramilitary team captured in photographs of the bombing, men from the DHS-linked firm Kraft International on the scene just moments before the attacks.
I'm not sure what your question was.
Okay, now I'll just repeat that. Can you hear me now, Mr. Lambrakis?
Better, yes.
Okay. The question was, why are we hearing that terror drills were held on the same day that the bombings took place in Boston? Do you think that in itself could raise suspicions because of the fact that I said their men from the DHS-linked firm Kraft International were in photographs just moments before the bombing and are accused of not doing anything or acting against this?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by terror drills. And I'm not sure that even that's true. You hear a lot of things on Twitter, and it's been clearly pointed out that a lot of it has been false. In fact, even some of the first reports that came out from CNN and others turned out to be false as well. So you can't believe all this junk that you hear on the internet. You've got to cut through it and wait a little bit until you find out what really is happening. But as to whether there would be an effort to have some security around the marathon, I suppose so. But you know, marathons have never been attacked before, and it's unfortunate that in the war against terror in general, people don't think of most targets until one of them has been attacked somewhere. Nobody ever thought of a shoe bomber on a plane until there was one, or an underwear bomber until there was one. In other words, this is the first attack of this kind, a marathon attack. And so I don't suspect there was much security involved in this. There were an awful lot of people. You can't control who comes and who goes. And even if these people were known, which I don't believe they were, you can't keep them from going to the marathon, and you're not going to follow them around because you just don't have that kind of personnel to do that. So I just don't understand why this issue even comes up.
So, Scott Rickard, I guess they're in London saying that you can't believe anything that comes up on the internet, but a lot of people are saying we can't not believe photographs that have been taken and have been put on the internet, and they're saying that these photographs actually show one photo, they say, clearly showed a large fragment of the first bomb bag, which matched the Kraft backpacks perfectly, referring again to those working for Kraft International. And they were saying that at least this deserves some attention, at least by the media or by authorities, to give some kind of reference to it, to explain about it at least.
I agree, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of photographs that have been highly questionable, and they've been absolutely ignored by mainstream media. You know, there's no doubt that paramilitary forces were there. These guys were former SEALs. They had the emblems on their caps. They had the emblems on their jackets. There's been a lot of folks that have come out and talked about a lot of these things, and nothing's been discussed in mainstream media. There's been a lot of things on Twitter that have been incorrect, but there have also been a lot of things on Twitter and Facebook that are actually suspicious. And the fact is that nobody's looking into these, and you cannot believe everything that the police officers and everything that the FBI is telling us. They have undoubtedly committed false flags in the past. This is not an uncommon practice for the military and the U.S. government. The Gulf of Tonkin is a great incident. The USS Liberty is a great incident. All of these incidents are incidents that were false flags that brought the Americans to attention and made Americans involved in foreign policy that they shouldn't have been involved in. And even the underwear bomber that Mr. Lambrakis mentions, the underwear bomber is highly suspicious. This is a guy whose father is the #1 arms dealer in Nigeria. This is a guy who's bought $2 billion from, his father bought $2 billion from the Israelis and the Americans in arms. The underwear bomber was a highly suspicious guy. How did he make it through the airport in Schiphol without being fully surveyed by the cameras that are in that? I have never seen footage of him walking through the airport, and this man got on an aircraft flying to the United States. Abdul Muttalib basically flew to the United States without being surveilled in the airport at Schiphol. That is a complete lie. In fact, the surveillance systems were being run by an Israeli company that was basically basically a Mossad company. So you have a lot of very suspicious activity. And to say the underwear bomber was not a false flag, that is highly, highly, highly undoubtable. You cannot say that that was not a false flag.
Okay, before I put the next question to our guest in London, I'd just like to bring in another of our Facebook comments, one of our viewers expressing his views on this. Let's take a look.
Well, they certainly acted in a very unfortunate manner, throwing pressure cooker bombs and gunfire at police if they were not guilty, because it does not look like the behaviour of innocents.
Her rather than his, Barbara Pedrick Blyde, who gave that remark there. Now, the question to Mr. Lambrakis is, a lot of people are saying that despite all these questions, we have to accept these are people that carried out dangerous acts. They should face justice, whatever. But there has been a debate right now, Mr. Lambrakis, about how this remaining suspect should be treated. Some saying, going as far as saying that she should be treated as an enemy combatant. Others saying that the term terrorist for him is too much because he should be treated in a civilian court as a criminal. What do you think?
Well, I think there is both of those things are being argued. But frankly, I go for the criminal side, and I think that's where it will probably end up. The issue will be whether it goes under the federal courts, in which case you could have the death penalty. We are told that he shot himself through the throat. It's possible that that is a mistake. Maybe he got shot through the throat. If he did shoot himself through the throat, it suggests that he's not afraid of dying, but then people change their minds after they've been alive for a while when they tried to kill themselves. Who knows? That's a big question. But you know, I have to get back to this whole issue of a conspiracy theory. I'm reminded of the very strong arguments that the attack September 11th in New York was done by Jews or Israelis or someone. Okay, well, yes. I am looking at the camera, but even the side of my face, I think you can still see me.
Yes, go ahead. Continue,
well,
Mr. Lambrakis.
I just think, you know, this idea of false flag and conspiracy, yes, occasionally you've had things. Incidentally, I don't think the Liberty is a case of false flag. It's a case of the United States not chasing Israel down for having killed Americans on its way to attacking Egypt in 1967, which Scott brought up. There is the Tonkin issue, of course. There are such cases, but to assume that therefore almost everything is done that way is very much Middle Eastern conspiracy theory, where everything is being done by somebody evil.
Okay, I guess Scott Rickard, do you want to give a response to that?
Well, obviously not everything is being done by conspiracy theory. Obviously things do happen, but in this case, you have a lot of questionable events, and the sequence of events was very muddled. You had maybe 6 police officers that were involved in the gunfight, from all the details I've listened to, and throwing pressure cooker bombs from a car, and the attack, and who ran over his brother or not. A lot of this stuff is still very unclear, how the first brother died and what the actual firefight looked like. And it's very difficult to get it from a police scanner. I mean, at one point, the police scanner, people thought that they robbed a 7-Eleven, and now they're saying it was another crime being committed at the same time. So a lot of the details that have come out in this and a lot of the questions around this are because we don't have a clear story on what's actually happened. And so that does raise a lot of questions. Now, whether it was a conspiracy theory or not, I don't know. But the big question I have is, was somebody aware of these guys? And if they were aware of these guys, did they let them go ahead and do this bomb so that they could allow this to happen? And that doesn't surprise me. That is what I suspect that happened on 9/11. You have Able Danger, and Able Danger was following all the 9/11 guys that got on the plane. This is a DIA operation. Yes. And Anthony Schaefer will tell you, he was one of the guys on Able Danger. They were following these guys.
I'm sorry for stopping you here, because we are short of time. I'd just like to bring in another comment, the final comment on our Facebook page, which raises another question altogether. I'll put that question to both of our guests when we come back.
All a setup. Kill one suspect, then disable the other. Remember Waco? All dead. Remember 9/11? Remember Kennedy, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King? Just another victim of this evil system. Funny that they're all Chechens. It's like saying, hey Russia, we'll help you, now you help us with Syria and Iran. But not only that, as soon as this happened, the CHISPA bill was passed. How convenient.
Reference there to the bill refers to what we're hearing US legislators. I'd like to bring that up with our guest in London, Mr. Lambrakis, saying that this bomb attack should be used to tackle the issue of legislation to permit private companies to disclose, they say, cyber information to the US governments. This is being seen as giving the government free rein to monitor the internet. Do you think that it is going to be used to justify these kinds of activities?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a conspiracy. Second, I think that when you get so many military and police and everybody involved, it's going to take a while to figure out exactly what happened where. The fact that this hasn't been all described exactly at this point doesn't mean there's a conspiracy. It just means it takes time. It's a messy situation. As far as what others may suddenly try to do with this in the Congress or elsewhere, who knows? I mean, it is possible that people will try to use it for all kinds of things, but I think it's ridiculous to say that the U.S. government is specifically trying to get the Americans to go to war, and I'm not even sure what war the Obama administration is preparing, according to these people. It's certainly trying very hard to stay out of Syria, but it's getting dragged in through a variety of this situation.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm afraid that the real issue that will come down to is Chechens. Are Chechens going to be blacklisted? This could happen in the long run, like it happened with Iranians after they seized the American embassy way back in after the revolution. They were having great trouble afterwards. They got kicked out of America, a lot of students who were there.
Right, Mr. Lambrakis, I'm sorry for jumping in here. We are really short of time. I'd just like to give under 2 minutes or 1 minute to Scott Rickard in Florida for us. So, Scott Rickard, would you say, a lot of people have been saying that the fact that during the operation in Boston, the state, some kind of martial law was imposed, people were not allowed to come out. This is suggesting that it is going toward what some people are calling a police state, and it's going to give people excuses to infringe on civil rights. What's your idea?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge infringement on civil rights. Now, that being said, you know, you do have to protect people's safety. Now, this guy was one man. It wasn't an army, but they had a huge amount of people that went after him. And you have to take a look. It's not the U.S. government. You know, the U.S. government has been infiltrated for several decades by foreign governments. So there's a lot of folks like Zelikow who investigated. He was the head of the 9/11 Commission. There's a lot of folks that have inside information and also have, you know, inside people inside the FBI and inside the DIA and inside the NSA. And these folks are the guys that can cover up things, that can shove things under a carpet. And another thing is, you know, they just approved another $130 million to arm Israel. So to say that we aren't a country that has infiltrated people, that we're not aligned with other countries that are basically violating the sovereignty and basically turning us into a fascist, militaristic state, that is very, very naive, and it's very irresponsible, because that is what's happened in my lifetime in the United States.
Scott Rickard in Florida, former American intelligence linguist, with us there. Thank you very much. A big thank you to a guest in London as well, former US diplomat, Mr. George Lambrakis, with us there. Thank you so much for staying with us on another edition of The Debate. From me, Homa Lezgi, until our next programme, it's goodbye.